All right, we'll get started here. This last little section for this morning, and that'll be the last time that I speak for today, unless I need to just call out something. We're going to talk about JavaScript fundamentals, just to have everybody on the exact same page. And then we're going to talk about pair programming, which we're going to start this afternoon pretty much right away. So inside of JavaScript, I'm going to create a file real quick, just with some basic things, just for people to know. And again, if you want to take notes, that's fine. All of this stuff that I'm saying is also inside of your curriculum, inside of lecture materials. So I just want to create a file. How do I create a file from the command line? Touch. We'll just do basics.js. You can list everything out. I can either subble everything by using subble space dot, and that will open everything that's currently inside of desktop, inside of Sublime. Or if I know exactly what I want to do, I'm just going to do basics, and Sublime is going to open basics. Again, if you're using Atom, just replace subble with Atom. I don't know what Visual Basic is. I'm pretty sure it's just VB.
It's code.
It's just code? Oh, cool. Code.
Cool.
Yeah, code basics.js. All right, I've got 3 screens here. Let me dump this here. What the heck? Yeah, there it is. All right, let's talk about data types. So inside of JavaScript, there are 2 primary data types. There's primitive data types, and then there are basically objects. So primitive data types include strings, numbers, booleans, undefineds, and nulls. What's a string? Let's just add, what's that? Just any character, right? So if I have just like any string, it's just anything within single or double quotations. I could have numbers in here, I can have null, I can have true and false, I can have whatever I want. As long as it's within those single quotes or double quotes, it becomes a string. Yep.
You could also use backticks.
I could also use backticks, but what are backticks mostly used for? Interpolation, yeah. But yeah, it's up to you. Most people still use single quotes for strings. For interpolation, I do backticks. I agree with you. So a string is basically anything within quotations like this. A number, obviously, 2, 3, 4 integers and things like that. What's a boolean? It's equal to true or false. We'll just say true, and then let boolean 2 equals false. What are some other primitive data types? I kind of mentioned them a little bit earlier.
Floats.
We can do floats. What's a float?
A decimal number.
Yeah, so float equals 2.5 or 3. We'll just do pi. Why not? It is technically a number, but the float is more specifically going to be decimals. But it is part of the number family. Yeah. So we have any string, which is anything within a quotation here. A number, generally, a number in JavaScript, I think, is whole number. Integer is definitely whole number inside of Ruby. Booleans are true and false. Floats, pi float, is going to be any number with a decimal inside of it. There's also undefineds. There's also nulls. Those are primitive data types, and you can think of these kind of primitive data types as kind of building blocks in order to create programs. So when we start writing functions, when we start using arrays and things like that, these are more or less just the building blocks, the very fundamental behind everything. Yep.
This might be a dumb question. So a float is a decimal regardless if there's an integer in front of the decimal point.
As long as there's a decimal.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is not a number primitive?
I think so. Not positive. We can find out. So we have, on one hand, we have primitives, and on the other hand, we have objects. Objects include, JavaScript objects, Ruby hashes. We have arrays, we have dates, we have regular expressions and functions. Let's talk about objects. So what is an object? Inside of
Is it a collection of primitive data?
You can think of it like that, but let's just don't even use primitive data types and stuff like that. That's good to know. But let's just make it really summary, easy for everyone to understand.
It's a reference.
It's a reference.
Yeah.
Even simpler.
Key value pair?
It's just a key value pair. It's a collection of key value pairs. But yeah, it's a reference. So we have a bunch of key value pairs. So let's just say that when we think of an object or a dictionary in Python or a Ruby hash, these are all names for the same thing. So JavaScript object, Ruby hash, Python dictionary, they all reference the same type of data structure. It's basically a bunch of key value pairs. It's a collection. Think of it as you're going to a daycare and you got a kid. The kid is going to be the key and the value is going to be the parents. There's always going to be something referenced with that, with one key goes to one particular reference. Or think of it as like a VIN number to a car. When I do VIN number V5, whatever, that points to a 2012 Tesla Model S or something like that. It's when one particular key always refers to one particular value. So let's just say like BT123 goes to a Tesla Model S, and so on and so forth. It's just a bunch of key value pairs. Let's say like BT321 goes towards, what's the worst car that anyone's ever driven?
Ooh, Geometro 2008.
Ooh, we're really going there.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So when I have an object here, this is just a collection of data of key value pairs. This is one full key value pair. This is a second full key value pair. If I want to access, if I want to get to the Tesla Model S, how would I have to reference it on this next line?
Would be object, and you can use the dot notation, or
I'm not sure I can do VT123 like this.
oh, so you do the bracket.
I can do the brackets, square brackets, curly brackets.
Square.
I've never seen an object.
That might be a Ruby thing. Let's find out if this works.
I'm pretty sure that you need it. Hold on.
Nope, you're right. This might be this is a Ruby thing. Cool. So VT123, and let's see if this works. So I'm going to just grab it. I'm going to do let object equal this thing. VT123 will return me that Tesla Model S. So every single key in here is going to be unique. The values may be the same, but all the keys have to be unique. So that's an idea of an object. It's just a bunch of key value pairs. I'm going to comment this one out. Comment, again, is just a human readable code that the interpreter is going to skip over. We have also arrays. What are arrays?
It's a list.
It's a list. Okay. We'll have array equal a list. What are some of the big things that you've learned between the difference between objects and arrays?
Arrays are comma separated indexed.
Okay.
Objects aren't key value pairs.
Yeah. Pretty much that's it. So an array basically keeps track of an index. So it has like, think of a pillbox, right? Like everyone has like older people that they know, and like they always have pillboxes full of things. Like everything that's inside of Monday is going to stay inside of Monday. Everything that's inside of Tuesday is always going to stay inside of Tuesday. If they drop it, no big deal. Like those pills are still going to remain at the exact same location. You can always rely on it being exactly right. So an array is just a collection of stuff. I can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over here. I can have a bunch of strings. I can have a null. I can have a true and false. I can have anything that I want inside of this giant container. You can kind of think of it as like just a box. Not a box. Just think of it as like a container with like specific sections for everything. My array can also have objects inside of it. So I can have this object from over here. I can have a smaller array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inside of there. Like there is no shortage of what your array can actually hold. So Sean was saying, with this object here, we reference things based off of keys. This is really good for like the DMV when it's like every single VIN number is completely unique. I don't need to keep track of individual indexes because I know that every single VIN number in the world is going to be unique. Inside of here, I can have duplicates. I could have 1, 2, 3 at the 0th index, and I can have 1, 2, 3 here at this index as well. How do I access, let's say, true? I'll give you a hint. It's going to be array 5. Let's see. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got it. So unfortunately, computers are different from us because 0 is actually considered a number. For us, we start counting at 1. Computers start counting at 0. I don't like it. It's just kind of like the way that it works.
You know, if there's a modern language that actually counts at one.
I don't think so. I think there's too many people who program starting at 0 that it's just going to be 0 forever. So we talked about variables. We talked about integers and strings. We talked about mathematical operators. These are all things that you can find in like Codecademy and everything that you've learned so far. I want to talk about two different things. I want to talk about logical operators. We'll talk about parameter passing, and then we'll talk about method writing. So let's say something is true or false. Let's say something is true and true. Let's say something is true and false. The ands are pretty easy to remember. So this is a comparison operator. So it's basically saying, like, if something is true and true, then it's going to result in being true. If something's true and false, it's going to end up in being false. It's really easy to remember because just think of yourself, you're on a date with somebody, right? If you are having a great time, just having a ball, and your date is having a great time, is it a great date? Yeah. Let's say that you are having a great time and your date is not having a great time. Automatically, it's a bad date. Or if you're unhappy and your person that you're going on a date with is unhappy, it's a bad date. If you're both unhappy, it's a bad date. So basically, the only time that something is going to be true and true is when the only time you're going to have a happy date is when both of you are happy on your particular date. So the only time that anything is true and true is going to be when it's true and true. Yeah, you kind of get where I'm going with this. On the other hand, we have true and false. We have true or true, true or false, false or true, and then false or false. This is every single condition. So true and true gives you what?
True.
True. This one, unfortunately, you just have to kind of memorize. What's that?
True. True.
Nope. Right, is it?
You only need one to be true, or the whole thing is true.
I think you're right on that one. Yeah. So you can kind of think of it as this. Whenever you see that, like the easiest way I kind of figured it out was like, if it's an or, most of the time it's true. If it's an and, most of the time it's false. But this one is fairly easy to memorize. Just think of the date that you're going to have over here. Let's talk about creating functions. So let's say we have a function where we want to add to any particular number. I'd write function add to. I pass in some sort of number. And then I'm just going to do console log number plus 2. So what I've done here is I've created a function called add to. Every single time I call add to and I pass in a particular number, it's reusable code. It's kind of like a variable that we were talking about a little bit earlier today. Whatever I pass in, like let's say I do add to, the first time I'm going to do 5, the next time I'm going to do 21 or something like that. The first time through, when I do add to with this parameter 5, the variable number is saved as 5, and then it's interpreted over here. So I'm going to console log the number, which is going to be 5 plus 2, that gives me 7. The next time, it's a totally separate run. So I do add to, number is equal to this 21. I'm going to console log that 21 plus 2. So this is one way of writing functions. This is kind of like the older way of writing things. Kind of like var was an older way of declaring variables. There's something called fat arrow functions. Have we found that yet? Yeah. Sean, how do I rewrite this as a fat arrow function?
An arrow expression.
Yeah. So tell me what to type.
You delete the function keyword. You
Okay.
use let or const. I
Okay.
go with const in this.
Why are you going to use const in this one?
Because functions are technically objects and they don't get reassignment. Even though things happen inside of them, they're constantly always the same.
Yeah.
As far as
That's correct. Yeah, so when you're creating a constant, when you're creating a function, it's something that generally doesn't change. The insides might change, but you're not going to overwrite it. So I'm going to have add to, and then
equals, and then parentheses with the number parameter inside of it, and then equals with the arrow, exactly, and then
Fat arrow.
open brackets, or close brackets,
Yep.
and then you can fill it out.
These two things are identical. by and large, I want you to start using fat arrow functions. I generally do not want to see function because it's a little bit older. You're going to see this everywhere, but as people are moving more towards the newer versions, like this was one of the big things inside of ES6, which stands for ECMAScript 6. It came out in 2015. Basically, you don't need to know this right now, but it will get very important when we get to React. It automatically binds the concept of this. And that's all I'm going to say about that for right now before everyone starts to lose their mind.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, we write functions like this regularly. We're going to start writing it like this. So all I'm really doing is I'm getting rid of the function, putting a constant in the front instead. And I said, set that equal to whatever the parameter is with a fat arrow and then the squiggly brackets. It's just I'm moving things around. That's all you need to know for right now. But I want you to be writing it in this fat arrow function from now on.
The other thing about these arrow functions is like Ruby, they actually have an implicit return that's all in one line.
Yes.
It's really unusual in JavaScript. The only place to find it.
That's right. Okay, so we covered the basics of JavaScript. I think I am recording. I am recording, good. And we're going to talk about pair programming, and then we'll be done for this morning. So I want to start with, does anyone have an idea of what pair programming even is? Yeah, Michael.
It's two people, one computer. You're one person telling the person who's typing what to do.
Yeah, there's different ways, so it's not necessarily like one person telling the other person what to do, but it is essentially that it's two people, and generally speaking, one mouse and one keyboard. It's an agile software development technique, which we'll talk more about on Wednesday. It's a process of developing software. There are certain companies in Chicago and around the world that do pair programming. So essentially, the times that I see it work are one, when it's a consultancy and they can build their clients for a lot of money, or two, when they really want to follow agile software practices down to a T. And we'll talk more about agile software processes on Thursday. But essentially, it's two people, one computer, and that's what we're going to be doing here on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And on Tuesday, Thursday, we're just going to be doing solo. This is a picture of a company called Pivotal Software. It just IPO'd. I think they just IPO'd. I think they were valued at like $3 billion last year or something like that. But they just IPO'd maybe 2-3 weeks ago. But they're a software company, and part of their product is a company called Pivotal Labs. They write software for big companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield, for Aon, for Let Us Entertain You Restaurants, which is like this huge restaurant group here in the city. And generally speaking, this is a picture of what you'll actually see at a company. This is not the Chicago office, but you'll have two people working on this exact same thing, working on one problem. Good parts about that is that you can learn a lot of things really, really quickly, because if you're sitting next to a senior developer, if you're sitting next to me, there's a lot of things you can glean from my writing code, and there's a lot of things I can learn from you as well. There's not necessarily like just a one-way relationship. You have cleaner code, because when you write code and like you're completely stuck and like the spacing is a big mess, like someone else is going to be like, hey, I think you should move this line over here. You got extra spacing over here. An extra set of eyes never really hurts. Also, the great thing about pair programming is that you have to fully formulate a thought in your head before you open your mouth, which is not something that may or may not happen when you're actually just doing things on your own. Because I see people yesterday just kind of like blankly staring at their screen. I was like, I have no idea how many levels deep they are in their own head right now. But when you're pairing with somebody else, you have to get everything out of your head, which means you have to fully formulate what your thoughts are. Your brain moves a lot faster when you're doing pair programming. Something I'd recommend on days that you're doing solo, which is Tuesday, Thursday, bring in some sort of stuffed animal or something that you can yell at. So there's a concept called rubber ducky programming. It's the programmer who wrote about it basically said, I have a rubber ducky, I put it on the side of my desk, and then whenever I'm stuck, I just talk to the rubber ducky, because most of the times I know what the answer is. I just need to get it out of my head. But what's the negative part about pair programming? One, you have to get along with other people. Two, it's really expensive. So these like Pivotal Software charges out around $125 an hour, which means that if you're charging out 2 developers, it's $250 an hour to write one thing of code. But the benefits generally will outweigh the cost of it. But it's really only for like very large companies like that. When you're when your companies that you're serving are like Coca-Cola and John Deere and like things with billions of dollars in revenue. So Josh and I are going to demonstrate pair programming in just a little bit. But again, pair programming is an agile software development technique. 2 people, 1 computer, 1 keyboard, and 1 mouse. And there's generally 2 ways that I would recommend going about it. One is called Driver Navigator. Another one is called Ping Pong. So Driver Navigator is basically one person says, if you've ever gone on the super long road trips when you're, based on what I could see, when you were younger, or kids or something like that, you would have one person driving the entire time, and you'd have one person with the Yahoo Maps or MapQuest printout, and that person would just basically direct you where to go. Now with the, with GPS, it's something a little bit different. But think of the driver as the person just writing the code. It's the dummy behind the wheel who doesn't know anything about the directions, just is typing the code. That's their responsibility. The navigator is the person telling them what to do. So I would recommend, if you're going to, when you start pair programming today, just have specific roles for maybe 45 minutes at a time. One person is just the driver. I'm just going to type the code. I'm not going to argue. I'm just going to type what you tell me to type. And then the other person is just the navigator. I'm not touching the keyboard. I'm not taking anything away from you. I'm just telling you what to type. After 30, 45 minutes, switch and switch and switch and switch. So that's called driver navigator code. When we talk about ping pong code, ping pong pair programming, it's basically what it sounds like. You are both talking and you're both typing and you're both like just bouncing ideas back and forth. It's just kind of like a truncated driver navigator role. Instead of doing 30 to 45 minute chunks, you might do 30-second chunks if you're really ping-ponging well.
What's your preference?
I generally do, it depends. When I first, at your stage, just do driver navigator because it's too easy for one person just to take over completely. And seeing as people are all over the map and we want to like learn and how to do things well, just do driver navigator for now. But later down the road, like you can ping pong. All right, so let's, how am I going to set this up with the camera?
Can you give me a brief description of Agile?
What's that?
Can you give me a brief description of Agile?
Sure. The question was, can you give me a brief description of what Agile software development is? So there's 2 ways of writing software, generally speaking, 2 big ways of writing software. One is called Agile. Agile being like very like, I can move real quick, I can pivot on a dime. And that's the idea behind it is I have very, very short bursts of development. So it's like maybe a week or 2, like between like somebody writing what you want me to do, me writing the code, me testing the code, and me deploying the code. But on the other end, there's something called waterfall, which is generally what they did until the early 1990s. So my mother's company, she works at IBM, it still does waterfall. It does like a waterfall starts at a certain point and goes all the way down like this. And then only at a certain point when it reaches the absolute bottom, will the water evaporate and go back up to the top and then start all over again. That's the cycle of a waterfall. So at one point, you're only going to do requirements gathering for like, what do you want the software to look like? And I'll do that for 3 months. And that's the only thing I'm going to do for those 3 months. I can't do anything else. Then I'm going to write the software for 18 months. And that's all I can do for 18 months. Then I test the software and I can only test it during that period of time. Then I deploy and release it at a certain point. That's all I can do during that time. If any new requirements come up, sucks. If you want to test it outside of this, sucks. And it's a very rigid process. And then, it led to great software being written, but they saw like, because I can't add in like this tiny little line of text at the very bottom until 24 months from now, it's not essentially the best way of doing it anymore. Agile's just basically short and waterfall, but we'll talk a lot more about that on Wednesday. I think I might just cut it there. For remote, hang tight. I will figure out how to best pair you 2 up, and then in person, I will do we'll figure out how to set up our machine so that we can do pair programming effectively. But basically, choose someone that's we have an even number of people. Choose the person right next to you. You're going to work with that person for today. Remote, you 2 are going to work together. I'll get you set up in about 15 minutes. Is that okay? Yeah, sounds good. All right, we'll stop recording here and then kind of pair up with the person next to you.